My name's Mick Doherty. This is Joe Van Son. We're from an organisation called SEDA, and what we're here to talk about today is when good kids choose vet. So, position here is the State Manager of SEDA in WA. Jo is our COO, and she's based in Melbourne but has come over for this conference. We'll give a little bit of context to what we do at SEDA, but then we'll talk about how we use partnerships and how hopefully you can use partnerships to engage students in vet and help them to achieve more and help your program to achieve a bit more. I first came to WA about 10 years ago as a phys ed outdoor ed teacher from Victoria, so don't hold that against me. I'm an Eastern Stater, but when I first got here I was really frustrated with the system at that stage where there was TEE and non-TEE, and your smart kids did TEE and your not so smart kids were pushed into what at the time were CAF courses, and now we've got vet, and in Victoria we've got vet that is linked with VCAL, and Jo will be able to talk a little bit more about that. But I found it really frustrating that I would get these bright students who were interested in non-TE subjects who were then counselled out of it because it wouldn't help with where they wanted to go on their pathway. And when I moved back to Victoria in 2010 and found SEDA, I found an organisation with a similar passion as mine for engaging students with whatever they're passionate about and helping them to get on whatever pathway they want to be on. And so it was, for me, really rewarding to then be able to bring this program back to WA a couple of years ago and get it going. Jo has come from Victoria University across to SEDA, and she's used our cohort in Victoria to do some research into this, and she'll be able to ask a few questions and challenge or ask you to challenge some of her theories about some of the research that she's done based on engagement through partnerships. So good kids and vet kids, that's the challenge that we've faced, and I think in mainstream education we still face that today. So that's something that we challenge every day at SEDA, and hopefully can work out ways that you can start to challenge that as well. So we offer Year 11 and 12, a program that is outside of school, full-time for students, and it's based within industry. So instead of students attending a normal school, they are with SEDA and they're at a site within industry. So in WA here we have a sporting program, so our students are educated at a sporting pavilion, at a facility within the community. So we're engaging them through their passion. We are educating them. Once they're engaged, they're a lot more easier to educate, and then we're empowering them to go on to the next step of their journey, whether that be employment or further education. I'll let the video explain it a little bit better.
I am absolutely in love with this program.
This has offered me so many opportunities that I wouldn't have got where I previously came from.
There's so many skills that I've learned at SEDA that's going to help me.
I never thought that I'd be getting this sort of experience at my age.
I love coming to SEDA because it's fun.
Well, SEDA exists because there's a real need for this type of applied education. We've got the capacity to engage students in a way which gets them out of the classroom.
I'm a practical learner. I can't sit in a classroom and read a book. I have to be doing something, so this program's great for that.
Putting on my Melbourne City SEDA uniform makes me feel important. We're not always stuck in a classroom, how we always experience a range of different things, such as volunteering at games, clinics, work placement.
I love having the same people around me all the time, and even how it's based at a football club. Like, you're always just talking about football. It's great, you know.
So now that everyone within your classroom and your peers share the same interest, it's just so much better.
Probably the most important part about what SEDA does is it re-engages young people with learning. So we take young people who generally have become disengaged about some part of their schooling, and we help them find ways that make education meaningful for them.
I started looking into SEDA, and that's when, as soon as I saw it, my eyes just lit up. I've gone, yeah, this is the place to be. As soon as I saw it, I've just started convincing Mum and Dad, please come to this information night, please, I'll take you there. Public transport, I organise a lot, pretty much begging them to come. Here I am now, loving every minute of SEDA.
I was a bit unsure, probably about year 9, 10, on what I want to do, and then SEDA come up and it's been the best thing I've done.
So yeah, it just makes every day really fun and enjoyable, and you want to come to SEDA.
Well, before, when he was doing his academic studies, he was starting to disengage from school. This year with the program, he wants to do well. He's always asking us questions, but then he goes away and he does the work. He's motivated. He's really motivated.
I think another reason why the program works so well is we partner with peak industry partners, whether that's through sport, the arts or building a trade. By working with a partner, students are able to make the learning experience real, and that means there's an outcome. So whatever they're doing actually has relevance to them.
So we're simulating match examples here with the SEDA students, and it gives the students also an opportunity to engage with the umpires and see what it takes to be successful at the top level. So we see it as a two-way street. They're helping us and hopefully we're helping them.
We've got students working in the game development department, the community department, in the football department, so they get a really broad experience.
We'll have a number of SEDA students on work placements throughout the year in a variety of different departments, learning the ins and outs of what happens at an AFL football club. One of the real pleasing things is these students are just so excited to be part of the program, but it's really harnessing that excitement into learning skills that they can take forward for the rest of their career.
With this, you're actually working in where you want to go.
Well, it's going to make him employable. He's going to have some skills he can take to future employers.
The partnership between the Songroom and SEDA Arts is incredibly beneficial for both. It's a win-win situation.
But yeah, working with the Songroom has been a very big part of my 3 years at this course. It was really empowering.
He was a little bit lost, and obviously now he's very happy with what he's doing. Obviously loves the way that the school have the program set up, and I think it's given him a new lease on his future.
I think there's a few reasons why the SEDA model works so well for students. I think one of those would be the quality of relationship that they have with their teacher. We have one teacher to a class, and students get to know that teacher, and teachers get to know their students really well.
I think the best thing would be the relationship that you have with the teachers. They've got the same interests as you.
I have them for the majority of their time within the program. So that creates a really good rapport with the students, and it also creates a relationship where I have an understanding of whereabouts they're at with their learning, and they can also have a lot more contact with me in terms of if they do need extra support, we can really make sure that we can cater to the individual.
So SEDA has all the support networks you'd be used to in your traditional high schools. So beginning with things like literacy support, moving right through to wellbeing support, and then on to pathway support, which helps students identify their career and their pathway and then access that career and pathway.
For us, it's really important that young people have every opportunity to be supported to complete their Year 12 and to be able to make positive pathways into work opportunities.
Well, it might just be about when they first come in, just getting my Year 12 pass. But then once they're here and they realise that SEDA can take them wherever they want to go, they can go to university. But if they just want to go out and get a full-time job somewhere that they enjoy, it's a perfect opportunity for them to do that as well.
Our courses, they're mainly about how do you apply knowledge. But I think SEDA prepares the students really well and probably does a better job of preparing the students than maybe some of the more traditional pathways through secondary school.
I really think that I would not have gotten into my course if I hadn't done all the things that I've done with SEDA and because of SEDA. This year I'll be attending RMIT and I'll be studying a Bachelor of Media and Communication.
This year I'm going to be studying a Bachelor of Performing Arts at WACA in Perth.
I'm currently studying at Deakin University, completing my Bachelor of Health and Physical Education.
Studying Bachelor of Business, Marketing, Event Management here at La Trobe University.
I'm working in a gym called Freedom Fitness.
And I'm the Football Technology Assistant at the St Kilda Football Club.
It's going to teach them self-discipline. It's going to teach them self-motivation. For me as a parent, bring it on, because I'd rather see my boy motivated the way he is now than just going through the motions.
There's so many opportunities I get in SEDA, things I never thought I'd get an opportunity to do, and I get it all here.
Okay, so VET is all about being hands-on, and as you can see from our humble beginnings with 16 Cricket Victoria students, if you look closely, you may recognise a famous one. We can't claim his cricket ability, but he's now obviously taken that to the highest level, and hopefully we can claim the fact that we were able to get him through school by being re-engaged into what he was doing. But from humble beginnings in 2007, we are now operating in 3 states with programs now spread across arts, and you also saw building and construction, which is being piloted in Victoria. So we're not about talent, we're not about, students don't have to be good at something to be engaged in it, they just need to be passionate about it. And by going through that VET pathway and getting opportunities to learn by doing, that's how they get better about it, that's how they find their vocation within the industry. So we currently have almost 2,000 students enrolled. Here in WA, we do a Certificate 2 in Sport and Rec in Year 11, and we do a Certificate 3 as a school-based traineeship in Year 12. We also have English, Phys Ed Studies and Workplace Learning, and that creates our Year 11 and 12 model for our students. And then obviously we're then hoping that, or assisting them to go on with further study or to employment. They are engaged. We have our attendance data there. We also have our completion data, which, as you can see, compared to a normal TAFE course VET, is quite high, and partly we think that's due to our 1 teacher to 27 students all day, every day. But obviously, a lot of that is the engagement that they have through working with the partners in our program. And this is where we had last year with the half cohort going through here in WA, we had about 50 graduates, and this is where they've gone. So when we're looking at university there, the majority of those students have gone on to a foundation program, and the TAFE students have gone on to a Cert 4 diploma. So again, with partnerships, we've been able to forge partnerships with Notre Dame University and Murdoch University, who have recognised the ability of our students going through and how driven they are to succeed, and they're offering places to our students in their foundation programs once they finish with us. So we're getting students who have come out of mainstream education, who I would like to call, so if you look at the 2 ends of our spectrum, we've got your battlers. We've got your kids who are starting to really fall out of love with school, and school was falling out of love with them. As a former phys ed teacher, we've got plenty of kids that I would have had in the phys ed office helping me set up for the carnival. I would have loved them, but their English teacher might have been starting to lose patience. We've got plenty of those kids, but what we're here to talk about today is how we can engage the so-called good kids, and we're doing that by giving them opportunities to work within the industry, to network with people who they may one day want to work with, and by being engaged by what they're doing and not having to stay in school and do the things that they may have been good at but not particularly enjoying, and therefore they were disengaging from that mainstream education as well. So we have many partners. They're our partners nationally. These are our partners in WA. So we've just formed partnerships with Basketball WA and West Coast, and we'll be starting programs with them next year. But currently we have 4 Fremantle Dockers programs, so about 100 students. We have 2 programs each of Perth Glory, Netball WA and a Cricket Australia program, and we've got a multi-sport program running down in Bunbury with a handful of kids from each sport. What it means for the students, I think that's the most important one first. You can see the students are getting to wear the logos. They're putting on a uniform that's got the Fremantle Dockers logo on it. It's purple, or it's got Perth Glory on it. They identify with that, and so they grow a foot as soon as they put that on. They've got pride in it. Their level of responsibility is automatically increased by just by the fact that they are now associated with that brand. We know how much kids love brands, and we know how much they aspire to be like their heroes. Our students, each week, for their school-based traineeship, they actually go out, their teacher takes them out to primary schools and they run clinics in that sport. So they're going out, that's their hands-on learning, but they also then feel like they're doing something on behalf of their partner. They're contributing to Cricket Australia's national game development objectives by going out and running T20 blast centres. So they can actually identify that the work that they're doing has some meaning to the greater good for that partner, and that makes them feel valued, and when they get a pat on the back for that, then that also gives them that feeling of success and pride. They're also, students are identifying that there are opportunities they can have working alongside those partners that they wouldn't get in a general school, and I guess that's what we're talking about here in your training organisation or in your schools. Are there opportunities for partnerships within the community that you could provide your students that help to engage them and help them to feel more motivated to get involved with their learning and have the same sort of effects that our students are feeling in our program? The partners obviously need to feel like they're getting something from it as well. And so for our partners, the reason that they come on board with us is that they do get that extra workforce. So they've got increased game development. So Netball WA now have two groups of netball students going off into primary schools one day each week and growing the game of netball alongside the game development officers that Netball WA pay. So this is a partnership. They're not paying for the service of our students. Our students are being paid as trainees to go out there and do this on behalf of the partners. They also get the opportunity to develop their staff, so their junior staff can then come and be involved in the training of our students. Our students will all get their level 1 coaching and their level 1 umpiring. So you've now got game development officers who are maybe straight out of uni and out there running clinics. They actually now get to have some training opportunities to develop our students and to help bring them up. In the community, that's where I guess they're the bonus gains. So we've also been, through working with our sporting partners, we've been introduced to organisations such as Inclusion WA, Special Olympics WA, and other community organisations that now also get the benefit of having enthusiastic, active young people out there doing workplace learning and helping out with them, which then comes back to the students, and the students are getting, again, more experiences working with people with disabilities, working in other areas of the community, being introduced to LGAs that they might not have known existed. So we see it as a bit of a win-win-win that everybody is getting something out of the students being engaged through the partners. I've created just before I pass on to Joe, one of the reasons I'm so passionate about what we do at SEDA and the reason that we've talked about good kids and vet kids today is that 2 years ago when we first came to WA, I interviewed this student. Steve's not his real name, but he was at a private school. He was doing academic subjects. He was doing English literature. He was doing politics. He wasn't going so well in them, but you could tell that he could have if he'd wanted to. But he was really starting to disengage. But he was passionate about soccer, and he knew where he wanted to go in the industry. He wanted to be a sports journalist, and he wanted to do that through soccer. So he left his private school. His parents obviously saved themselves some money. But they took the leap and enrolled him in our vet program, whereas at school he wouldn't have been counselled into vet subjects, especially at a private school like the one he came from. During the program, so he completed Year 12 with us. He did a work placement at Football West, working within their media department. He also did some volunteering for Perth Glory at match days and worked hard there, making sure he got to know the people that he was working with, and they got to know his work ethic and where he wanted to go. Had those conversations with the right people, did a really good job, and he finished his year 12, but then he was offered an internship at Perth Glory working in their media and communications department, while he also went on to Notre Dame, and because he was a bright kid who'd been disengaged, instead of doing the 6-month foundation program there, they just put him through the 6-week course over summer, and he ended up where he would have been had he stayed in mainstream education anyway. So, or may not have if he'd gone through year 12 disengaged. So for me, that's evidence of being able to engage a student by involving them with partners, giving them opportunities to get out there and actually do it and do what they're passionate about, and then find themselves back on the same pathway where they'd wanted to go, but having just got there a different way. So hopefully we can start to provoke some thoughts today that help you find some similar ways to do that with your students. And Jo will now talk about some of the study that she's done to find out what the students actually think about the partnerships.
Thanks, Mick. So just to start with, I actually was working at Victoria University looking after all of our early school leavers. So the university had 2,500 young people that hadn't completed year 12. We're at TAFE, and our own research showed that only about 30–40% were actually completing. So my work was about how to improve completion rates. I came across the SEDA program, and they have these incredible figures about VET completions. And I don't know about you, but I wanted to understand how those came about and whether they were real. So I got myself employed there. I'm the Director of Education and Chief Operating Officer, and now I need to own the data, which is an interesting place to be. But for me, at the same time, I was being encouraged to do a doctorate, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting to have a look at how this partnership actually works? So this next session is really about starting to think differently, and at times I'm going to possibly upset Mick even in terms of the kinds of things that I'm thinking about, but I wanted this session to be an opportunity to really kind of think a little bit differently about this and take you on my journey. So what I was really interested in is what's the benefit of partnerships in this space? So we say it does engagement, but what do young people actually say? What do they think? Do they think these partnerships are worthwhile? Yes, they're happy to wear the Dockers brand, but beyond that, how do they benefit? So just a bit more of a critical view, and I'm in this interesting position of being both the researcher and the director, so a really challenging place to be. So my question was really about how do these partnerships shape the learning experience? Which ones do young people value, and what does the partnership contribute to those learning experiences? And just to explain a little bit about the Victorian context, obviously senior secondary completions is incredibly important, and the Kirby report that came out in 2000 was really about saying the VCE system in Victoria isn't working. There's lots of young people disengaging. We need this thing called VCAL, and a much more hands-on applied learning program was developed, and in Victoria it's either VCE for your academic kids, let's call them the good kids, and VCAL for the others, okay? And there's a fair bit of research that says VCAL and its the attachment of VET is the dumping ground for the disengaged. So, and one of the, I suppose, pieces of advice in the initial report that was done was teachers are left to create partnerships with community and industry as part of VCAL, but really those partnerships are not particularly strong. And then you put that next to an organisation like SEDA that's been able to do incredible work about developing partnerships with organisations like Cricket Australia. Now, what school is in a position to have a partnership like that? And many schools would give their right arm for those kind of relationships. So how does that come about? So my research is a case study. The first part was I did some interviewing of the senior managers that were involved with setting up the initial partnership with Cricket Victoria to start with, which became Cricket Australia, and really having conversations with them about how those things happened. Students also created, in their last term, before they finished, they created 3-minute videos of them talking about what they valued in partnerships. So I've done some thinking about, well, what are they telling us? And then the last one also did some interviews and then also talked to on-the-ground teaching staff about what they saw was happening on the ground. So very much my research is student-focused. The group that I am researching actually completed a diploma. So in Victoria they do a 3rd year, year 11, year 12, followed by a diploma, which even that is unusual. Can you imagine getting a year 12 student to stay and do another year at school called a diploma in the same organisation? Hard to imagine, it works. So we have about 75% of year 12 completers transitioning directly into the 3rd year. There was about 105 students in that cohort, and those students had spent at least 2 years in the program. So initially some of the research shows that to develop a partnership, and none of this is rocket science, you need at least one person in each organisation that is a complete champion of the relationship, and not afraid to use brand in education, which is really unusual. We're actually reasonably uncomfortable in education to attach ourselves to brands, and you know, one of the first things schools worry about is how will we be perceived if we attach ourselves to a brand. Both partners shared the value of the brand, so they understood what it could offer and what benefits it could offer. One of the interesting parts about the Cricket Australia SEDA partnership is that they had a shared language, so just the importance of, when I interviewed them, they talked about the win-win and a level playing field as kind of ways of describing and understanding the relationship. The other thing that sport does is it uses personal relationships. So really senior people using their personal relationships to create partnerships. And they were prepared to take risks. So you imagine the Dockers putting those students in a Dockers purple shirt and expecting them to do the right thing. We know now that as soon as a young person makes a mistake on a train or public transport, who do they ring? Do they ring the Dockers or do they ring SEDA? They ring the Dockers. And within 15 minutes, Mick knows about it, even before the student gets to class.
Doesn't happen very often, thank you.
And I suppose the other part in the partnership is both organisations valued education, and students are at the centre of all of those conversations. When I spoke to the young people, 2 really strong themes come through. This particular group, it's about the love of cricket. It's what brings them there. And that kind of foundation in schools is often missing. So you can have a history class and you've got about 2 kids that love history and the rest are putting up with you as the teacher. So this kind of shared love of cricket is what really holds the program together. But the second more interesting part that I came across is what happens when young people actively choose to leave school and do schooling differently, is that they take on this persona of, I'm in charge, I've made this decision, I'm owning this decision. So the love of cricket is very much about belonging to a class, and imagine being in a class with 25 other young people who are just as excited about cricket as you are, and you share that interest, and your teacher is just as interested in cricket as you are. It's kind of hard to imagine what that might look like. The other thing is about building on existing skills. So you imagine you're a young person, school isn't really working out for you, but you love cricket and your weekends are your best time. You come into a class where all of a sudden those skills are valued. We value your cricket skills and we want to build on them, the confidence that that brings. And because of that, they're prepared to take risks. So these young people talked about taking recent arrivals to the cricket and explaining the game of cricket at the MCG to a group of recent arrivals as part of the global cricket program. So they're prepared to do things that they wouldn't otherwise have done because of cricket. And they start to see themselves as successful learners. Really, again, this is not surprising, but what they love is being allowed to go to the MCG, to be involved in a test match, to be allowed to be at the nets and in the change room with famous people. And the sorts of things that brings about for them, like pride and being valued. Important events, so the students get to be involved with the Melbourne Stars and the Melbourne Renegades. They get to be on the ground. These are what would seem kind of trivial things in an educational context, but makes an incredible amount of sense for them. So they're choosing to do school differently, as I've already said, is very much about active choice, effort, hands-on, choices, autonomy. It's up to me, I've chosen this. And interestingly, this is not parents making choices about leaving school, it's young people choosing this. They actually apply online, and some of these young people told me that they applied online without mum knowing about that. And then they got invited to an interview and they were like, I'm going to need to talk to her about this because I haven't told her. So it's them actually choosing that. Choosing their response when they do things like high adventure activities. And this word opportunity, you could hear it in the video as well, young people talking about being given the opportunity and feeling lucky about the things that they're being asked to do. Who can remember schooling being anything but trauma? Imagine it being full of lucky things and opportunities. And particularly future focus, it's a really big theme that comes through is, I'm giving you this opportunity, you make out what you do with it, but this will help you go where you want to go. So what happens when we do that? So now I want to kind of think about what would it mean to redefine the good student. So all the research says that in schools, good students are girls. They're academic, they sit still, they hand their work in on time, and they ask good questions. So they are none of the things that bring the students to SEDA. We don't see a lot of those in that nicely formatted way. What we do see is boys, frustrated by school, passionate about cricket, is on time. This is a really big thing. The kind of constant need to be professional, high expectations. They participate physically, they're enthusiastic, they know what they want to do with their life, and possibly along the way discover that they want to go to university. Now this is kind of, as a researcher, I stand back from this and say, isn't that interesting? How does that happen? Okay, what is the culture in this organisation that creates that as the good student? And for me, how that comes about is because of the partnership. So in schools have expectations on young people, teachers have expectations of young people. But when you work in partnership, you've got a third element. The partner has expectations. And that partner is valued by the students. This is not some partner that the students don't care about. This is Cricket Australia. And I've always wanted to wear their uniform, and I dream about playing cricket for Australia, so they're pretty influential in my aiming to be a good student. But the good student is different to what is in schools. So when we talk to what we now call our good students, this is the kind of thing they said. I've said it many times to people, it wasn't about ability, it was just apathy. I wasn't motivated, I couldn't really see a point. I was very disengaged with the whole thing, and it just seemed, yeah, sport was sort of my really big issue, really big focus. So partnerships create this balancing act for us around the good student. So one of the key things that I've been deeply thinking about is, one of the things that you might have heard Mick talk about is about the opportunities that come up. And when a good opportunity comes up, which student do you think it goes to if it's a partner opportunity? The good student. The good student. So even in our own classes, we have good students, which is male, prepared to turn up on time, wears his uniform, understands responsibility to the partner. And then you've got those that are not so good at that down this end, okay? So when an opportunity comes up for a partner, the good students get those opportunities. But my question is, who is the student that would actually benefit the most from these opportunities? And this is a challenge from being involved in high-profile partnerships, because the partner wants the good student. doesn't want the riffraff. And we have a bit of that as well, like every other educational organisation. So this balancing of the good student versus who actually benefits the most. One of the other things that comes out of my research is what partners love about young people is that they're enthusiastic. Okay, so the partners have recognised that if you're going to run a clinic for a primary school, to have 25 young people, 18, 19 years old, running that, it's full of enthusiasm and kids love it. When you send a 40-something-year-old development officer who's done 100 clinics, it's nowhere near as good. We know that. But on the other end, they're also young and that makes them unpredictable. So they do crazy things. They do unpredictable things. And so in partnerships with young people, as part of those partnerships, we're constantly weighing up this tension. And so what I'm saying is it's not perfect. The other challenge for us is around this last kind of challenge, which is around the activities and opportunities we create that are good and benefit students, and then the benefits that we need to create for the sport. Now, mostly they go hand in hand. But if I was to give you an example like volunteering, if the partner needs a certain amount of volunteering from students, then that is a sport benefit. But at what point does the student stop benefiting from volunteering? Do we make sure that they have the opportunity to opt out and say, you know what, I've done my volunteering, I'm done with that. So again, it's one of the spaces that I've been thinking about is how do we continue to kind of balance those priorities and interests. That's about all I've been thinking about. Does anyone have any questions for us or things that kind of come up for you out of all of that? Anything you disagree with? Anything that made you go, that doesn't make me so happy? Yeah, yes?
I get the sense that this would work really well in a metropolitan setting. Have you got any regional schools that you work with?
Yeah, we do. Do you want to
so the question for those playing at home was about regional programs as well as metropolitan. So we, in Victoria, we have major centres covered, so Ballarat, Geelong, Bendigo, places like that. We started a program in Bunbury here last year, and so they're based at the Bunbury Football Club, and rather than being a pure Dockers group or a pure netball group, there are 4 or 5 students wearing each of the logos down there, and they go out and run a term of footy clinics and a term of soccer clinics, and the program is flourishing down there. And they just did a really big event for Special Olympics WA Southwest at the end of term 1, where and I guess because word of mouth spreads really quickly in the community, they're now in high demand to be going out to primary schools and doing those sorts of things. And there is a different feel. I grew up in the country, and I love going into that Bunbury group. There's a different feel amongst the program there. But they're really enjoying being quite different in their town because they're a long way from the Fremantle football ground or from Cricket Australia, but they're connected because they're wearing the logo.
Some context, I'm from up in the Pilbara region, so we're talking like 18 hours from major cities, so the opportunities there are quite limited.
Yeah. Look, and I think that's one of the challenges. We are, at the moment, we're in the second year of a program for Tiwi College, and that's an in-school model. So we've got 18 of the senior boys, all Indigenous young men, undertaking the SEDA program with a certificate too. So it is possible. I think one of the real challenges is about the opportunities, like what are the opportunities beyond running great clinics and being involved in the local community, which has had incredible benefits. You can imagine this group of boys going out in community running football clinics in the local primary schools, but it is much more challenging to get them involved with, say, a game at the Dockers, for example, or even to be able to come into Darwin.
So is that program, though, where do those students come from to your
At Tiwi?
The Tiwi College students are based at Tiwi College and they go to school there, and we've embedded the SEDA program into that school. And then we've really worked with the community to make that work. So what are the opportunities that arise during the year in that community for the students to be engaged with.
And as the WA manager, I've been watching that one with interest to see whether that might be something we can convert here, given the vast spaces that we have in this state and similar communities.
Process for application for students to get into the SEDA program, and I guess, is there sponsorships or like?
Okay, so the question was about application for students to get into the program. They go online and apply. They come to an information evening, or we're starting to deliver some of them online now. Them and their parents come into an interview, and that's really about us getting an understanding of whether they are passionate about the sport and that they've got the basic level of skills and abilities to be able to get through the program and succeed in the course, and then they're offered a position based on that. And we have had some students in WA in our program here who are staying with family or have got some boarding facility. We don't have our own boarding, but they've been able to make those arrangements for some students to come down from country areas.
We're getting quite a few questions from the audience, so I might use the microphone if I could.
But I've also got a question for you from the webinar.
Okay. Did you want me to use the microphone or not?
Can I?
Yep.
Yeah. That's not working, right? Is it working now? Check. It's still not working. It's still not working. I'll just wave it. I'll get you to repeat the question out for me. Jackie from Challenger has said, as a design student, we used to be discouraged from taking on professional jobs as there was the perception that we were taking work from the industry. Do you deal with any resistance such as this? And if so, how do you overcome it?
Terrific question. So do I need to repeat all of that?
You don't need to. They've got it. I've read it directly from the screen, so that's fine.
Yeah, okay. For me, one of the key reasons why this partnership works, or the partnerships work, is because the students are able to do work that those organisations aren't able to do themselves. So the ability to deliver primary school clinics is really limited by the sports. So that to me is kind of the key difference here. Is this is an outcome that the partners want done. And really can't afford to do. And at the same time, they provide, really significant benefits for the students. Sure.
How does you do some construction, or I saw something in the promotion about construction training. How does the construction component, as opposed to the sporting model, how does that work? Do people do are they just doing construction as a VET? Because we've got some partnerships with schools and involved in construction training, and I'm interested in the model if there's something about this sort of model that could be taken on. So.
Sure. So that's a Victorian program. So again, it's a senior secondary program, and it has a VET component. So Simmons Homes approached us and said we would love to develop a program in partnership, and we really don't have it's really about they didn't have the apprentices that they wanted to have for their own workforce development. So they see their involvement as being very much about developing the next cohort of apprentices. But what we know is we need young people to stay at school long enough to complete Year 12 to have the literacy and numeracy to take on apprenticeships. So it's a 2-year, Year 11 and 12 program. They complete Year 12 and they actually do 2 Certificate 2 qualifications. SEDA don't deliver the VET for the construction qualifications. Simmons Homes actually have their own RTO. But the whole program is completely designed around integrated project-based learning around becoming the kind of apprentice that the industry is looking for. So, one of the first days that they were at Simmons Homes, one of their senior staff took them through the display areas and told these young people who were like 17, just out of Year 10, how they would go about selling a Simmons home. And you could see them kind of going, well, we have to do this next week? Like, you're actually telling me things that I need to learn, so can you just repeat that? Because I just missed that. And it's probably been, I don't know how many years for those young people where they're actually going, I need to know that. You're telling me this because I need to know it. That's totally different. So it kind of raises expectations in a way that, you know, we have young people who tell us they've never completed a task at school and no one's held them accountable all the way to year 10. How does that happen? Yeah. Yes?
I have a question about the competitive placement. So obviously as the competition for placement grows, obviously there needs to be decisions about which students you have in the program versus those that you aren't able to take on just due to sheer limitations in numbers. Obviously that decision point between the good student versus the bad student, the student that's academically capable versus the student that isn't. Yeah. How are you justifying to a student who is academically capable and then for some reason becomes disappointed because you've selected a student who perhaps isn't and is showing those first signs of disengagement?
Yeah. Oh, you go.
I think probably, I mean, some of the selection is very much about, it's very much on a first kind of, what do you call that?
I guess we avoid that competitive situation by opening applications in May, and then students are judged on their suitability for the program and offered a position if it's there, rather than pooling the students until a later point and then making decisions between students.
But we're really basing that decision on, is this the right program for them? So there are some young people who, you know, want to go on and do medicine. This may not be the course for you, so having that conversation with them, but also they need to be really interested rather than mum's interested in me doing this. They need to be interested, and generally we also expect that they come with a reference from a sport coach that says I'm capable of commitment and regular attendance and those kinds of things. It's just that we won't always value the Year 10 report in the way that, say, an independent school might if you went to apply there.
And just getting back on my take on the good students, is that medicine student, I've actually had a few students that have come in doing 3A, 3B subjects in Year 11 flying, and I've actually had that conversation with them and their parent there and said, look, if you're still thinking about any of those sorts of things, and then I've actually had their parents tell me to pull my head in and say, this student is really passionate about sport. Yes, they can do those subjects, but they've got their whole life to go on and do whatever they want to do afterwards. This is the pathway they want to follow now. And especially with our partnerships now with Notre Dame and Murdoch, those foundation programs open up pretty much the whole university rather than just sport and rec. So we're still able to provide for those students, and they're great. They provide fantastic leadership for some of our you know, previous school avoiders who might come in and need a bit of positive leadership. So. Sorry, he's got the microphone. So.
It's all right. My name's Grant. I'm from the Department of Transport, Marine Safety, and I work at the Marine Education Boat Shed. We've actually had the Department of Transport on as a RTO delivering units of competency vet in the sport and recreation, 3 powerboating, canoeing, snorkelling and sailing. First of all, I do need to compliment you. We've had 4 of your students come down through Notre Dame. They're doing their degree in sport and recreation with Duncan Bignell, and the quality that's coming on. They've come down to the boat shed to do an induction program to carry further on. Now, two things. We put 200 kids through those units of competency, but there's an area of the follow-up. For example, I need to digress a bit in respect. I'm also involved in Yachting Australia, and I'm seeing now a lot of our kids being developed for instructors and trainers for sailing. Has anybody thought of most probably doing a relationship or creating a partnership with either Yachting Australia or Yachting West Australia? Because I know I can give you at least 25 kids here.
Yeah. Great question. I'm assuming we heard all of that, but in Victoria we actually run an aquatics program, so we have a class of 25 young people, and it probably hasn't grown any bigger than that. It's always been just a class of 25. And
Yachting Victoria is one of the partners.
Yachting Victoria is one of the partners.
It was never mentioned. We've just had a 3-day conference and it was not mentioned.
Yeah.
And I've put that area up. So I may be talking to you later on.
Yeah, that's great.
No worries.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, good question.
I was just asking about how do the students meet the WACE
component?
Okay, so they're doing English, so they're doing the general level, not the ATAR or the foundation. So they're doing English, phys ed studies and workplace learning. And of course the VET can take up to 40%. So there's 40% there, plus then the English, phys ed studies and workplace learning makes up the 60%. And that's how we get them through. So we're obviously a bit more flexible in our timetable because there's just one teacher with one group at a sporting pavilion. So if they need to change the bell times or change the way they go about flipping from VET to WACE to get through, they can. But that's the way we're managing it. Yeah, so we employ our own staff who are qualified teachers as well as Cert 4 trainers and assessors. So self-sufficient in that regard with that auspice. So something I didn't mention is that our students are enrolled through a host school. We've got a couple of relationships with contracts through the Department of Education for our students who are enrolled there, but they actually never set foot in that school. But all of our results and attendance is passed through there to the department for them to be able to achieve their WACE. But we're delivering that. And the same with the RTOs. So we've got partnerships with West Coast and with Central, and they auspice to us so that our staff deliver and they give us a certificate at the end.
Grant, again, a follow-up question. How is it funded?
That's well, there are various ways. There's the funding that comes in through the schools, so the amount, what's the SRP, I think they call it? Yep. So the SRP is passed on to us to be able to employ our staff and manage our own overheads. And then also there are the same sort of funding from the TAFE for the
VET component when students are doing the school-based apprenticeship.
And then there are student fees as well.
Yeah.
So it's a combination.
That's
right. It is. It's a bit of a jigsaw puzzle.
Yes, thank you.
I think we're all done for the questions, unless there's anyone else online that wants to ask a question.
It's all good, thank you.
Well, thanks very much for today.
Thank you.
Authorised by the Government of Western Australia, Perth.